The AS-90 looked silly from the very beginning. Seriously, silly. A giant British box on tracks, thick armour, a short barrel by modern NATO standards, heavy, old, slow-looking. By the 2020s, many military planners thought this silly Cold War howitzer belonged in a museum. And yet, on the battlefields of Ukraine, this outdated British gun started humiliating Russian artillery batteries so badly that Ukrainian crews began comparing it to a Mercedes parked beside broken Soviet scrap metal. That comparison came from a Ukrainian commander in early 2025. Standing near the frozen tree lines outside Pokrovsk, he laughed when asked about the AS-90. Compared to Soviet guns, he said, this thing feels like a Mercedes E-Class beside an old Ziguli. That was the moment people realized something strange was happening, because the AS-90 was never supposed to become a war legend. The British Army originally built it in the late 1980s after a massive European artillery project collapsed under politics, delays, and spiralling costs. While everyone else argued, British engineers quietly gambled on their own design. That gamble created the AS-90, a 155mm self-propelled howitzer weighing over 46 tons, carrying nearly 50 shells, operated by a 5-man crew, and capable of unleashing 3 devastating rounds in under 10 seconds. That rate of fire mattered a lot. Modern artillery battles are not won by who fires the furthest, they are won by who shoots first and disappears first. And this silly-looking British machine became terrifyingly good at both. The AS-90 could roll into position, fire a storm of shells, and relocate before Russian counter-battery radar fully reacted. Ukrainian crews quickly fell in love with its digital fire control systems, automatic gun laying, GPS integration, and fast targeting software. Meanwhile, many Russian crews were still relying on manual calculations, optical sights, and Cold War procedures that looked ancient beside NATO systems. That difference became deadly. Even though the AS-90's range was considered too short by modern standards, its accuracy and speed kept outperforming expectations. Ukrainian brigades used it across Zaporizhia, Kupiansk, Kursk, and Pokrovsk, hammering Russian positions with brutal precision. And then came the survivability stories. One AS-90 reportedly survived multiple Russian strikes in a single engagement: drones, artillery, and even a Lancet loitering munition. The vehicle was heavily damaged, but it did not explode. The crew survived. That matters more than statistics. By late 2025, Britain had transferred every operational AS-90 it still possessed to Ukraine. Over 100 vehicles in total. The British Army completely removed the howitzer from its own service. Think about that. An artillery system Britain considered old, silly, outdated, and no longer modern enough suddenly became one of Ukraine's most respected battlefield weapons. Why? Because war exposes reality fast. The AS-90 may not have had the longest range. It may not have looked futuristic. It may have seemed silly beside sleek modern systems. But it was built correctly. Reliable engine, fast firing cycle, protected crew compartment, strong NATO ammunition compatibility, excellent shoot and scoot capability, and most importantly, it kept Ukrainian soldiers alive. That is why crews refused to give it up. Even Russian artillery losses began stacking up at alarming rates, while AS-90 crews continued operating effectively under drone-heavy battlefield conditions. The funny part? Britain originally planned to replace the AS-90 because it was considered behind the times. Too tracked, too bulky, too old-fashioned, too silly. But in the most intense artillery war Europe has seen in generations, that silly British howitzer ended up proving something important. A weapon does not need to look modern to dominate modern warfare. Sometimes reliability beats hype. Sometimes crew protection beats flashy specifications. And sometimes the old machine everyone laughs at becomes the one soldiers trust with their lives. The AS-90 was supposed to quietly disappear from history. Instead, it became one of the most respected Western artillery systems fighting on the front lines of Europe. Not because it was perfect, but because when the shooting started, the silly British Howitzer kept working. If you enjoyed this video, hit like, subscribe, and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And let us know, would you choose the AS-90 over modern Russian artillery systems?